everyone. Welcome back to the Like a Boss podcast here with Grit Daily. I'm your host, Loralyn Mears.
And our guest today is Todd Belveal.
He's a serial entrepreneur and he's done some pretty interesting things. And his most interesting venture is the one we're going to talk about today, which is called Washlava. And you're thinking, what does that sound like? The guy goes up to volcanoes and cleans rocks? No, not along that line. But what he's done is innovate how laundry is done. And yes, there is a whole bunch of technology, like a multi-million-dollar platform behind it. So let's get into this. Hey, Todd.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. So I think our audience is, well, hopefully they're intrigued by that hook as I open things. I mean, that is the goal, to try to get them going. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about the industry. What's going on?
Sure. Well, I mean, the coin laundry industry is, as it's kind of affectionately or disaffectionately known to consumers and operators in the space, is a traditional one, I would say, in the sense of the dark ages. It's really stuck in Jurassic times as it relates to branding and technology and store conditions, equipment condition, really all things that people should expect from a public space where they spend money, really are not delivered at all in most laundromats. And 1 in 6 US households rely on these facilities as their primary way of doing laundry. That's close to 40 million consumers. It's an awful lot of, it appeals to it's a necessity for a mass, a very large, mass audience in the United States. And they exist in pretty much every country, across the world, since everyone does laundry regardless of where they are. So it's an industry, like I said, devoid of retail brands that people can trust in terms of delivering clean stores, modern store environments, new equipment, and new ways of paying for it. And on that latter point, it's devoid of modern technology, and that's not true of the newer appliances that go into these stores, but primarily of the user experience inside as it relates to point of sale or paying for it. 80% of the industry still depends on quarters, if you can believe it. It hasn't even advanced as far as the parking meter, and parking industry, which has come quite a long way as it relates to eliminating cash currency as a necessity for payment. In most cases, parking meters aren't even installed in cities anymore. So yeah, the industry is way behind, and our mission is to upgrade it in a couple of different ways.
Well, as someone who, through my college days, it was the hunt for quarters, and you never had enough quarters. You always ran out because you needed one more dry cycle or whatever else. And the quarter got you 5 minutes of drying, which did nothing because all of the machines in the laundromat were so heavily abused and heavily used. I mean, if you think about 40 million Americans doing laundry, that's a lot of loads of laundry. So I'm glad to hear that it's come a long way and made it easier for folks to do their laundry and not be on that hunt for quarters. I mean, local vendors didn't even give us change. They're like, no. I'm like, but we need quarters to do our wash. And it's either that or wear dirty clothes, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think, it has, on college campuses where we do, we have 2 business lines, college residence halls and laundromats. And we focused on college residence halls first. And we're on approaching 10 campuses, including MIT and Syracuse and others. The good news about that industry, if there's been any innovation, it's been there where they use card-based systems. I wouldn't call it sexy technology, and it completely ignored the smartphone. And while campuses are kind of rapidly moving to mobile credentialing for all student ID, including access to their dorm rooms and dormitories themselves, the laundry industry is, way behind in terms of even being able to integrate with those platforms for mobile credentialing. Good news for us is we're not, and we're ahead of the game there. So yeah, the days of the quarter on college campuses, I'm happy to say, are for the most part gone. But the card systems are really no better, and certainly not prepared for the cashless payment and mobile student IDs. But quarters are still alive and well in laundromats, the 25,000 or so in the U.S. If you were wondering where quarters were during the great coin shortage of 2020, they were in laundromats. That's why no one could find. That's why nobody could find them.
That's interesting. Now, Let's talk about, some of that tech. This is not your first rodeo, right? I mean, you've set up some other companies. Talk to us about your successful exit.
Yeah, I did. I founded with a couple other guys a company called Silvercar. It was a mobile-enabled, completely mobile and wireless, completely smartphone run airport car rental service. And we had a couple of unique things about it. We had one make and model of vehicle in our fleet. That was a silver Audi A4. And we rented it at one consistent national rate without all the excess fees and typical BS you find tacked onto your car rental bill, despite having rented a vehicle you probably would never choose to either buy or rent if you had a choice. I think big things, we ran the entire business on smartphones, both the front and the back end, at the field locations, no printers, no computers, no nothing. So it was advanced in that regard. It was advanced from a connected vehicle standpoint, meaning there really weren't any connected vehicle platforms when we began that work in 2010, 11. So we had to take apart the A4 and decide where to place sensors, from a pure IoT standpoint. And probably the most interesting was the gasoline tank, where we put 16 sensors in the gas tank so that we could get hyper accurate digital readings of gas consumption. So we didn't have to charge renters for gas they used or ask them to refill the fuel on their way back to the location, so to the airport to catch their flight, which is always a hassle for business travelers who are the primary consumer of a product like Silvercar. But once we began to buy lots and lots of Audis, hundreds and thousands, Audi became interested in what we're doing and the utility of the technology for other aspects of their business, like fractional ownership of cars, dealership, augmentation for loaner programs, those sorts of things. They began to, and the car rental business, they began to invest in us and then gradually ultimately acquired it for cash in 2017.
Excellent. So now looking back with a couple of successful programs and companies under your belt, Todd, what's that bit of advice that you'd like to give other startup founders and say, hey, this is one thing you really need to think about?
I would say the best advice I tend to give people is, once you've decided that, you have something, well, I think it has two dimensions. It's sort of a two-step piece of advice. Once you have confidence that your idea is good enough to be a business that scales, keeping in mind that the definition of a startup is something designed to scale and scale fast. You need to understand that the difference between a startup as a philosophy of building a company and a small business. Neither is better than another. I think startups get a little too much hype. There's a lot of failure in startups, much less than in small business, much more failure in startups than in small business. And it's not necessarily better. Small businesses can become very large. They just don't do it as quickly, typically. And the people that invest in them do not expect a different pace of spending, toward a result when it comes to startup. That's why technology is typically, where there's lots of spending required upfront in order to make the company viable, right? It's either services based on the technology that you build, as in the case of both of my startups, or it's the technology itself, as is the case with a lot of software, purely software startups. So my advice is to be sure you understand, those things, and that you have, what I'd call an extreme level of confidence in the idea, the research you put behind it, its fundamentals, before you decide to approach any investors. And once you have to believe in the idea almost more than you believe in yourself. Self-belief is simply not enough to be successful in achieving these things, particularly when it involves other people's money. And I've never bootstrapped any idea. It's too slow. Again, startups are designed for speed. So I would say once you have that, you've got those two things, then you should be off and running. You can choose to go approach investors and find the right fit. And I think just the second point of that is don't approach people where it's not a fit. Don't approach software investors with hardware ideas, don't, and vice versa. But I think the first part's really more important. Research builds belief builds confidence. And once you have that and are willing to start talking to enough people, and it takes talking to a lot of people, pitch competitions simply won't do the trick. They don't give you enough money to matter. Then you should be in good shape for success.
If we talk about things and success, talking to folks like yourself, okay, so you came up with this really innovative idea on how business folks could rent cool cars from the airport, and just someone who has missed flights because I've cut it too close, and then, no one's there to return the car, and, all kinds of things. Have you ever had a hard time with your businesses? Is it just all been easy, Todd? Yay, this is a great idea. Great, let's do this. Can you talk to us about any of that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Had a lot of hard times. I think everybody does. I think there's a couple of things that, on the first one, I didn't even know what an operating agreement was. I mean, I went to NYU for business school and they let me graduate without knowing what an operating agreement was. I knew a lot about Fortune 500 companies that are publicly traded and how to value them and those sorts of things, but in corporate finance, but very little. And it was 97, so it was early there weren't entrepreneurial studies programs. There weren't as many people pursuing these things this is a career, a career in search of an idea that didn't really exist. You either had an idea and that became your career, which is the case in both of my, situations. But what I always say about startups, the waiting, it's like the Rolling Stones song, or the Tom Petty song, the waiting. The waiting is the hardest part. I think, in my case, all I can do is speak experience, it didn't take long to get the seed round. Once I sort of had assembled the right team with the right resumes, that once you have that and you're getting, and they have decent sized networks of their own, you really must get more help. If you want to see your project launched, you get help, the right resumes, the right team that are going to impress the right investor. An angel round can come, pretty quickly, even though the odds are somewhere in 1 in 1,200 of any startup getting a seed round. But yeah, it gets harder. I think, people's motivations and there's sort of a friend of mine who I trust a lot. He has done startups himself. He calls them oscillating psychodramas because they're just so, people's motivations are so different. Their expectations are different. But the truth about them is that once you get that seed funding from someone else, I frankly, even if it were a friend and family, I don't take friends and family money, but if I did, I would still consider it other people's money. And once you do that, you have no option to quit. You might fail because your business fails. You can't quit for any reason. It's a thing that people don't really understand. It's not like other jobs that way, right? You can't. You took someone else's money. You can't quit until you've exhausted every option. To generate a return, on that investment that person made in you. And that's who they're investing in at the seed round in any concept. They have to like the concept, but, the diligence period is short and there's not a whole lot for you to show them. I think, early on people have to understand that. And I think people also underestimate how long these things take. Yes. Even if you look at research carefully, it shows the same. They all take 7 to 10 years before any meaningful liquidity event. You will likely, forget exiting, you will likely raise money 2 or 3 times in between. So all you're doing is raising money as a founder of a startup or working with a VC that has its own particular challenges. I've done it both ways. Silvercar was VC backed. Washlava has been more family office backed by some big family offices. But I've been sued by people who didn't have the right expectations. I've had nasty things written about me in the paper by some of those same people. And your own struggles, right? You have to kind of realize the stress that it puts on you. everyone has stressful, I recognize there's different stresses with different jobs, but the risk, people can underestimate what the risk, and the constant, accountability, again, for other people's money and making sure a return is generated on that money, can do to a person. So you have to be incredibly self-aware, of acknowledging burnout and acknowledging sort of when you're behaving a little bit badly. And it's like my assistant says, I blow up at someone like once a quarter. As long as I don't do more than that, I generally feel, pretty good. I try to avoid it altogether, but it's really very difficult to do, and it's certainly deserved most of the time if I do it. I'm just being honest, and I've been, and believe me, but when you're the founder of a startup, I'll leave you with this on that front. You are going to take a lot of shit.
Exactly, from all sides. Like, as a startup founder myself, I know the pressure of which you speak. Like, I describe it, on a good day, that you're grinding gears that haven't been oiled in a really long time because you don't have the investment money. You're bootstrapping it, and you're trying to go up a hill that's straight up. And if you fall down, you lose all your momentum and slide back down and have to start back up in the middle of the hill. And it's really hard. It's just
it's brutal. Momentum. It's all about momentum.
It is.
That's why you need to be thinking of the next choice. It's another good piece of advice. Get your funding round, go out, have a dinner, and then go. Or you should already know the next amount of money you're raising. And begin working on it, because if you lose momentum, they get really hard to sustain. You'll have bad interactions with board members and investors, and those things, they're simply unavoidable, because they're stressing about their money. You may be right on schedule, but they're still stressing about their money.
For sure.
And you're stressing about certain outcomes you want to achieve. But those interactions, whether I've had them with almost everybody who's invested in my business, whether they be individuals or not. I think it's just a question of, does it change anything about their belief in the business? No, typically every one of my investors re-ups in the next round for their pro rata share. That's my scoreboard.
There you go.
Even if they've yelled at me or I've yelled at them for not, voting a certain way or not contributing what I wanted them to contribute.
They come back.
As long as they're doing that, then that's the all systems go. Right.
All right. Well, last question here, Todd. We're about to wrap up. If you picked out a pair of shoes from your closet that best represented your personality, describe that pair of shoes to us.
The specific brand itself, or
sure, anything you want to talk about. Why did you pick those shoes, and why and how do they represent you?
Well, I my current shoe brand, and I tend to go with one at a time. But I have, I've got some nice dress shoes, but there's a brand called Athletic Propulsion Labs, or APL. It's a new company, relatively, and I have every pair of the Tech Loom Bliss that they've ever made, limited editions and regular colors. And actually, I have two pairs of the reds, as I'm a Falcons fan, and it's actually a perfect match. And so they're sleek, they're comfortable, they're airy. You can wear them with socks or without. They have white sole. There's a very clean, minimalist look. No laces on this particular shoe, but just really, really well designed. Well structured piece of footwear. That works. And then the odd thing about it is that I wear the women's 11 as opposed to the men's 9.5. Because it's a unisex design, but really you can, they say you can choose either one, and just whatever fits sort of better, and how you like. 'Cause they have some give to them. But yes, Athletic Propulsion Labs, Tech Loom Bliss, I think it says. And the colors are fantastic. I mean, they just they do a really good job with color. And to me, color is everything when it comes to trainers, right?
There you go.
So,
Inspires you.
The only pair I have from them that's white is white on white. Yeah, it's that's definitely my go-to piece of footwear.
I'll have to check it out. And I love this idea of unisexuality and getting rid of the men's department and the women's. Just buy whatever the hell you want to buy, right? And just wear it. If it fits and you like it and it looks good on you and it makes you feel good, hey, wear it. But with that, we are out of time, Todd. And so I wanted to thank you again, Todd, founder of Washlava, for talking to us and telling us a little bit about how complex the act of washing clothes has become. And thanks for bringing that technology to the masses. Thanks so much, Todd.
Thank you.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?